Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 100th podcast episode of the Emerging Franchise Brands. On today's show, I have the CEO of Kidokinetics, Dave Pazgan. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, Frank, how are you? Good to see you.
Great seeing you again, Dave. Welcome. Let's talk about Kidokinetics. First off, I understand you're the CEO. It's been founded by Terry back in 1999. Can you share with us a little bit of the origin of the company?
Yeah, for sure. So Terry is originally from South Africa. That's where she was born and raised. And she came to the U.S. in the late 90s. And her kind of background growing up was in the karate industry. Her family ran karate studios throughout South Africa. And so she kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit as well as a strong interest in sports. And so she came to the U.S. and ended up starting out teaching physical education programming. So she did some like contract PE work in the South. She emigrated into the South Florida market. So she did some contract PE work for a while. And always had this idea that she wanted to launch a business that would introduce kids to sports, specifically for the kids who maybe aren't the sporty kids, right? Like there are those, kids growing up that are, as soon as they get to a certain age, they're going to join leagues and be really good at sports and things like that. And her idea was that she learned so much through her experience in karate that there's just a lot of benefit to all kids to the idea of learning about sports and activity and, how to throw a ball and how to do a push-up and how to, swing a tennis racket and all of those kinds of things. And so she, for a long time, had this idea of building her own business. And so she started up Kidokinetics in that area. And kind of the kickoff of it was that she had an article written about her company in the local paper, and they promoted an event at a local park. And 80 kids showed up. And so she was like, wow, there really is a real need for this. Like parents are looking for what we're doing. And so from there, she started building her business, which included offering, parent paid enrichment programs at various facilities, as well as starting to do contracted PE work at, private schools and other venues like that. And so that's how she really got it all started.
Wow. There's just so much room obviously in the kid space for so much competition, and everybody can find, a niche to succeed. And, millions and millions of parents are looking for their kids to play athletics at all different levels. I love her mission and why she started it. I'm curious now, how did you meet Terry? When did you meet her? How did you get involved in the company?
Yeah, I met Terry in February of 2020, and I was introduced to her by a mutual friend, Frank Milner, who's the president of Tutor Doctor. Frank and Terry knew each other because they both were originally from South Africa. So they connected, we're both franchisors, we're from South Africa. They kind of connected on that level. And for a while, Terry had been thinking about bringing in a potential partner to help grow her franchise business. She started franchising the company in 2008. And by 2020, she had successful franchisees, but there were just 3 of them. And they were doing well and they were happy and liked the business. But, like a lot of emerging franchisors, she's an expert at her business and how to run a Kidokinetics location and run great classes and all those kinds of things. But, how to grow and scale a franchise company is a different enterprise altogether. And so she didn't really have that experience, didn't really have access to capital and resources to grow. And so she started thinking, maybe I need a partner to help me grow. And so Frank Milner, who I've known for a long time, introduced me to Terry, and we met at IFA that year in Orlando, Florida. And I got to sit down with her and her husband, Steve, for 3 or 4 hours. And I would say we really clicked right away, just mostly on a lot of common core values, both personally and professionally. Just a great person, great family. She and I just got along famously right out of the gate. And so from there, I had a chance to talk with some of her existing franchises. And like I said, they were happy and doing well and liked the business. And they were encouraged and excited to hear from me that, maybe there was an opportunity to see the brand grow and, bring value to their businesses that way. And so that was really how we got started. Prior to that, I'd spent the previous 11 years building a franchise in a different industry that I had sold to private equity. And so I, continued to stay at that company for a number of years after that. But, for me in 2020, I decided to, go be an entrepreneur again and find something more startup-y to get involved in.
I was going to say, I knew that was not your first rodeo in franchising, Dave. You've been in franchising a long time. Would you mind sharing with the audience? What was the concept that you were involved with before Kidokinetics?
Yeah, that company is called 101 Mobility, and what we do there is sell and install access and mobility equipment. Mm-hmm. So things like stair lifts, wheelchair ramps, home elevators, and things along those lines. And I had started that company with a couple of partners in 2008. We franchised it in 2010. Today they have, I think, around 100 locations throughout North America. I think last year they did about 120 million in system-wide. And my partners and I had sold the company to a private equity firm along the way. I stuck around for a number of years after that and helped continue to grow it. But so, had a good success story there. That company continues to do well, built a lot of really good relationships with my franchises there. Many of them I continue to stay in touch with, and they've built great multi-million-dollar businesses, many of them, and are, doing really well there. And
then you got bit by the franchise bug again.
I did. Yeah. I mean, after that experience and even during it, like I'm franchised for life, in my opinion. Like the whole concept of the way franchising works is such a great industry. Yeah. As I'm sure many of people on your 100 Now podcast told you, there's almost nothing out there like it, where, people who are kind of like competitors, I guess, are so willing to share what they've learned from, and, be willing to kind of share in the collaborative growth and success of franchising just as a business model. For some reason, people who get into franchising just feel like they've got to go share what they're learning with others and help emerging franchises get better, and, really build franchising as a great way for maybe people who would otherwise not get into business for themselves, find a pathway to business ownership. And then my personal passion is around high performance team building and around, building cultural, organizational culture. And you got a great lever to use that in franchising, because it's such a highly leverageable business. Here in 4 years, since I got involved in Kidokinetics, the footprint of the business, including the franchisees and their employees, has gone from, a handful of people to, probably 500 people by now. And wow. So, being able to leverage up that kind of quickly and turn that, community into a really strong and positive culture is what I feel like I was put here to do. And so, franchising is just super fun for me.
Well, obviously, you mentioned earlier that you clicked with Terry and her husband at the IFA, and you knew, okay, this was right. They were right for you. You guys were right for each other to work. But I'm curious to know, what were some of the attributes of the brand that made you think that this is the right brand? This is the opportunity for me to jump into. And by the way, you've had an incredible run of success as being CEO of the company. I mean, I know you shared with me earlier that you've got now 62 franchises open. You guys are in 30 states. You got your 4 company-owned locations. And this is all just a matter of a few years, right? She had 3 franchises before you came aboard. So share with the audience, if you would, like, what really made you connect, no pun intended, with Kidokinetics?
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't know a lot specifically about that industry when Terry and I met. So I just kind of started with looking at the fundamentals, right? Like how I was impressed, I guess, with the fact that she had 3 franchises at the time who'd been around for a while. Like the first one joined in 2008. So by that time, he'd been in the system for 12 years, successful, happy, doing well, profitable, he was checking all of the right boxes. And then she'd added another franchise a couple of years later, who was one of her coaches in her local business in Florida, purchased a franchise territory and was also in the system for a decade at that point and successful and happy. And then there was another one in North Carolina, that same story, was there and happy and successful. And they liked Terry. They liked the business model. They felt like there was a lot of long-term opportunity in the industry. And so, all of the basic fundamentals were like pointing towards a great success story. And then I kind of looked at the industry and said, well, how does this industry do? Like, is Kidokinetics a one-off and really doing their own thing and there's nobody else out there like that? And the answer is no. I mean, there's several brands out, building and scaling successful companies in that space. The biggest one is someone that I know well, and that's the brand Soccer Shots. Justin Bredeman, who's the CEO there and was one of the co-founders, was and still is a good friend. And I knew a lot about the Soccer Shots program just from my friendship with Justin. And he and Frank Milner, who introduced Terry and I, and a bunch of other franchise guys have been kind of meeting, from time to time and getting together. And Justin's been in that group for a while. So I knew a lot about it, and they had great fundamentals just at scale, right? So at that point, they were like a $70 million system, really strong, like 700 or 800K AUVs for multi-territory, good margins, highly functioning franchise organization. The franchisor was doing well, the franchisees were doing well, very little turnover, high, franchise business review kind of scoring. And so I looked at that and said, well, gee, the Kidokinetics business model and Soccer Shots, for example, we're in the same business. Like, we go to childcare centers and offer a sports enrichment program. And the only real differentiator is they're a soccer program and we're a multi-sport program. So if anything, I thought, well, gee, there's more channels of revenue that we might be able to participate in that, it would be hard for a soccer only program to do because, like, for example, Terry at that time and still was already doing a considerable amount of her revenue by teaching PE classes in private schools, where, you have a small private school that doesn't really have a big enough footprint or big enough enrollment to justify a full-time PE teacher. They may only need like 6 to 8 hours of PE a week. Teachers of the other subjects don't really like teaching PE or feel comfortable doing it. So many of these schools have kind of like a PE problem. Right. And so we plug in there and solve that problem. We, write the curriculum, we bring the equipment, we bring the teacher, and we make it a real turnkey solution. Terry's been working in many of those same private schools for 20 years now. So really strong, just recurring revenue. That was the other thing that I thought was really interesting when I looked at Terry's P&L and the P&Ls of her existing franchises. Their expenditures on marketing annually were in the hundreds of dollars, like very, very little money being spent on marketing.
Sure.
And so it's a very grassroots kind of business with a lot of recurring revenue. Once you build these relationships with channel partners like daycares, preschools, Montessori's, and private schools, they produce, for years and years and years after that. And so I thought, well, that looks like a really strong business model. And there was good industry validation out there that this works at scale.
Right. Dave, what do you think when you came into the company, right? What do you think were maybe some of the key, like 2 or 3 key things that you felt like needed to be, improved or radically changed to get this company on the trajectory that it's been on?
Yeah, I would say great foundational, elements already in place, like a good business model. Like, that's my, entry point to franchising, right? Fundamental business model's got to work. And it's got to work as a franchise, right? So the franchise can be successful and make a profit and still carry the cost of franchise fees and so on. So that was already in place. Culture was already really strong. Like, Terry had a good culture. The people there were happy. And like I said, they liked Terry. They felt like she was a good leader and all of that. What they lacked was infrastructure to be prepared to scale. So no real systems in place. They did some ad hoc kind of training, but they weren't adding franchises at a regular pace. So that kind of had to be built. So we had to build a training program for new franchises, an onboarding system. One of the probably critical things that I felt like we needed to do right out of the gate was to start building a business management system. I built my own technology. I say I built, but I had people that built technology at 101 Mobility. That was the backbone of that business. And the flexibility that you enjoy when you build your own tech, I think was really important to me. So we started down that path and started building technology, and built a system called KiddoLink, which we just a couple of weeks ago rolled out the kind of second generation of that system to our network. And, that's the main place that they go to run their business every day. So I started building that kind of technology. We needed capital. So I started looking around, sniffing around to see if I could pass the hat amongst my franchise friends and find some capital to bring into the business. So we had some fuel to grow, and, those kinds of things. So it was, structural, foundational systems. And then we started, hiring the team. We hired our first employee just about 3 years ago. It was May of 2021. And she came on originally, her name's Dina Landers, and she came on originally as our onboarding coordinator. She's now our operations leader. and probably like the best integrator, highly capable young leader that I've encountered in my entire career. And so she kind of runs the show, and we've now built a team of 13 people who help support our franchises every day. And so, that was a bit of a build over time, but all of those kinds of things had to be set up and put into place.
Sure. It's a solid number of people that you have in place for the number of franchises you have. So that's great.
Yeah.
One of the most popular questions I get from emerging founders is, it's always like, okay, where do I find my franchisees? Where do I get them from? So I get it that Terry had 3 to start out, but when you came on board, obviously the numbers took off. Would you share maybe with the audience, how did you guys find the first maybe dozen franchisees when you came on board?
Yeah, I think a little bit of it at first was just kind of some organic friends and family stuff. So I bought a franchise, for example. So I believed in the system enough to open a location actually in your area. It's in Tampa. So I purchased one and started operating it. And that was a little bit of a strategic decision as well, just to, help me kind of get really deep into the understanding of how this business works and what the challenges are. So I've certainly learned through that experience. The critical thing is we started engaging with the broker community in 2021 for the most part. And so a big chunk of our franchise development have come from FranChoice and FranNet and FCC and that crowd. So that's been a big part of it. And then we outsourced our franchise development for the past 3 years, and we're in the process of bringing that function in-house now. I do think that we're at a little bit of a pivotal point as a franchise. We've gotten some critical mass. We have great validation. Our franchisees are doing well and they're really happy. I'd like to see kind of a bigger mix of organic franchise development in our future because we've been pretty dependent on the broker community, which has been fine, and they've helped us grow. But now that we have a brand that's in a lot more markets, I feel like we're positioned to start making an effort in finding more one-to-one, like find the owner operator who wants to come in and roll up their sleeves and operate these businesses firsthand and find them organically.
Yeah, from my experience being in the similar sector or same sector as you, Dave, I also found that to be the runway took a little bit longer than I expected before we got the referrals of customers that were living, obviously in the territory where they were a customer and then they wanted to buy the territory next door. But it seemed like once the fire got lit, it just took off. Like it just became all referrals. And then our biggest problem was we were always getting franchise inquiries from territories that were sold out because everybody had bought up the surrounding territory. But it did take a little bit longer than I was hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, I think that play, like the organic in-house development play is a slower burn. When I look at your business, I kind of went back and no offense, but I've researched a bunch of your FDDs from way back when, just kind of watched the growth and, look at that as a model. As I mentioned, I know a lot about the Soccer Shot system, and, Soccer Shot's a good, easy example because they're almost a one-to-one comparison to what we do. They're a 20-year story. Terry and myself and Dina actually went in April of last year to their headquarters at Justin's invitation to, just spend a little time with them, do a little best practice sharing and so on. And, they've been doing it for 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't go the route of, they went almost all organic lead generation and franchise development throughout their history. And they built an amazing business, but it's a 20-year story.
Yeah.
And so, we're trying to grow a little faster than that. And so, we've taken a bit of a different path. But there is, to your point, kind of a tipping point where you get to where you have enough brand presence in the market, being, let's say, the United States, to where you're touching enough people, interacting with enough customers, you have enough franchisees out there where people start hearing about it and they go, well, that sounds really interesting. I'd love to get involved or find out more. And that's really hard to do when you have 3 locations, right? So totally. I think you need to get to a certain point where that starts to take a life of its own.
Yeah. Dave, who is your ideal franchise owner and what are the traits that they need to be successful?
This is a very much an organic, like community build kind of business. I think about, non-brick and mortar franchises as coming in kind of 2 flavors. There's a flavor where where the play is spend a lot of money on marketing to generate leads and then be operationally competent. So spend money, get customers, have good operations to service those customers, rinse and repeat, right? And those businesses can scale quickly, but a lot of times there's not much recurring revenue. You're always like, if you stop spending 20 grand a month, you stop getting customers, right? So there's that kind of business. Our business is different in that it's a bit of a slower build. You're not going to spend 20,000 or anywhere near that amount of money on marketing. What you are going to do is go out and engage in the community.
Right.
And that means building relationships with, channel partners like directors of childcare centers, people that are running private schools, the people that are running the parks and recs departments in your market. You're getting to know those people, build those relationships, gain their trust and confidence so that they feel comfortable recommending your program to the community. And then, as I'm sure you saw the same thing in your business, you also got to get to know the parents. It comes down, in many cases, a one-to-one. Like, I'm talking to Bobby's mom about Kidokinetics because
Right.
I think Bobby really needs to sign up and be a part of it. And so we're interacting like on a one-to-one basis with a parent. And so those kinds of things only happen for people who are comfortable getting out in the community, building those relationships, and doing that in volume and, repetitively, and, building that kind of, and never stopping, right? You kind of constantly
Right.
have to be out there turning that flywheel. We just had a conference in Dallas last week, a leadership conference for some of our franchises and other members of our leadership team. And we talked all about, building and turning that flywheel. And this is a flywheel kind of business. Like, once you get it going, there is a lot of recurring revenue, and it gets easier the longer you do it. But, you have to get out there. I call it being the mayor of Kiddo Town. Like,
Right.
somebody in your business, whether it's you, the owner, or someone that you've hired, has got to be completely comfortable with, climbing to the highest mountain in your market and telling everybody they can about Kidokinetics. The good news is that you're not going to spend a lot of money on it, but somebody has to do that work. So that's first and foremost.
Yes.
Is someone who's got that, community build mindset and skill set and is willing to put in the work and get that job done. The second element then is going to that operational competence part. I see our business as really simple. Develop that business through the, business development, relationship building, et cetera. And then part two is building a high performance coaching team that's out teaching the classes. Some of our franchises say, finding and hiring and retaining coaches is their biggest challenge.
Yeah.
And other franchises would say that's not a problem for them. And if you dig into what's behind that, for the ones for whom it is not a problem, they tend to be better at team building, better at, building that community of coaches, building that local business culture where they can hire the best people in the market that are going to be the most reliable, that aren't going to ghost you on a class. They're going to show up. They're going to put in the discretionary effort and teach a great class, such a great class that the kids and the parents can't wait to get home and tell everybody else about it. That's like that formula. And so if you can couple those two things together, a culture builder with a business development mindset, man, that's a home run in this business. And so that's what we're looking for. I would say the last part, and this kind of sort of comes with the territory, is I think you have to care about what we're doing. I think you have to be a bit of a zealot around the work that we're doing and the need for it. I think that's why our franchise model has been popular, is that for most people, that's obvious. They see too many kids with their heads down in screens. 80% of school-age children have two working parents, so they're at a child care center most of the day. Only less than a quarter of school-age kids are getting the amount of physical activity that they're supposed to get every day. And so people know that's a problem. There's a reason why more than a quarter of the kids in school are clinically obese. Like, there's a reason for that. And a lack of movement and activity is part of the reason. And so I can tell you that of the candidates that come and meet with us at our Discovery Day, the number of times that those candidates have said to me, well, I looked at a lot of different franchises, and as soon as I saw Kidokinetics, I knew this was the one for me. And I ask them why that is, and it's all about those reasons. Like, I understand the need. I think it's important work you're doing. I believe in the culture. I feel like this is a business that I can feel really good about. None of them have said, well, this is the one that makes the most money. Like, that's never been the answer.
Right. Right.
And so they're looking for a business that can do well by doing well, or do good and do well at the same time. I forget that phrase. There's a phrase there somewhere, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So but I consider that, like, there's a lot of people who are like that, not
Sure.
all of them are qualified to run a business. And so we look first for that, business development skill set and that team building skill set and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lifestyle business for sure. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I made a few notes while you were talking, and I want to kind of
Sure.
backtrack here a little bit. What I love what you said, of course, was talking about being part of the community. And what we used to say, I used to say in my old business, is that there is a bit of celebrity when you're in the town, and somebody needs to be at the top of the mountaintop, like you said, and sharing
Yeah.
all about Kidokinetics. And so somebody has to embrace that, right? Whether it is the franchise owner or somebody in the business. The other thing that you talked about was marketing, and you hit the nail on the head, so much so about spending money or putting time in. And I remember having some difficult conversations with a franchisee or two who didn't want to spend the money. And I would say it literally comes down to this: either spend the money or spend the time. But you can't do
Yeah.
neither, right? You have to do one or the other. And it is exhausting to do marketing, kind of like what you said, where you're spending just strictly money for marketing and not putting in the time. But you have to do kind of a combination of both. And then the other thing that I think is critical, these are things that are critical, not just for Kidokinetics or any sports related business, but really child related service-based businesses. And that's the last thing is, in order to be successful, we have to scale this thing, right? We can't be, our franchisees are not going to be successful with one or two locations. Going into one or two childcare centers or having a soccer league at one particular field in your community where you have this huge territory, you're not going to be successful, right? You need to do all of those things. So it takes a special kind of person to be successful in a child-related business. And last and most importantly, like you said, they have to care.
Yeah.
Right? They have to care about that business. Otherwise, it comes through loud and clear if they don't.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like I said, I think we are fortunate in that we, by nature of what we do and our core values and our culture as who we are, have tended to attract people who mostly do care. Like, I think they do care about what we're doing. I think they are definitely believers in the value of what we bring. And so then it comes down to, are they willing to do the work, right? Like, are they willing to get out there and be that, like I said, mayor of Kiddo Town? Are you willing to get out and tell that story? And one of the things that I found really interesting recently, we commissioned a focus group study because I wanted to understand from the customer's perspective, being a parent, like, what are the key things that they care about? And there weren't any like massive surprises in the study that we did, but there were two things that came through really, really clear to me. One of them was that you can run all the ads by me that you want on Facebook or wherever on my phone. If there's no social proof, if people in my community aren't talking about you in a positive way, that is noise to me. Like, putting an ad in front of me means nothing. What is meaningful to me is, my son's best friend, Billy's mom said, Billy, your kid needs to be in Kidokinetics because Billy's having such a great time and he's sad that Tom's not in the class with him. Right. That parent will run to their purse, get out their wallet and go to our website and sign up right then and there. But if they saw 50 Kidokinetics ads, who cares, right? It doesn't really matter to them. So that social proof, building reviews and validation in your marketplace are super important. The other thing that came out really clear is once you've overcome that hurdle and they've got the social proof and they believe that this is a good fit for their child, then the price is irrelevant. Like, they'll pay whatever. Like, there's not price sensitivity, in terms of, but it's too expensive. Like, that's never really the situation. They're willing to pay whatever, I think, to make sure that their children are getting the developmental needs that they have met on the activity side, on the physical side. And, what we do impacts the developing mind of a 2 or 3 year old that we're working with in ways that go well beyond just their physical well-being, their emotional well-being, their ability to socialize, all of those kinds of things are impacted. And parents want the best for their kids and they're happy to pay for it. They just want to know that what they're signing up is the best for their kid. And it's not just because some ad said so.
Right. They want to know what they can expect. They don't want to be disappointed. And we would never looking to gouge parents, but to your point, parents will pay for their kids to play in sports, regardless of the economy as well. And if anything, my experience with price sensitivity, Dave, has been with the franchisee who was afraid to charge more. It was not that the customer didn't want to pay more. It was the franchisee afraid. Sure. Once upon a time, our franchisees were afraid to break the $99 barrier. It was, you thought we were absolutely trying to, reinvent the wheel by getting them to charge more than $99. And we went right to ripping the Band-Aid off back in 2005 and went to $125. And what happened? Everybody paid it.
Yeah, everybody paid it.
And future franchisees never had that fear because to them, 125 was the new base.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, I think, I remember Justin was telling me at Soccer Shots, they, at some point along the way, they instituted a registration fee in addition to the enrollment. Yeah. And the registration fee was to cover, you get a shirt and you get some season prizes and things like that. And at first there was low adoption because everyone said the same thing. Like, there's no way parents are on top of paying the regular enrollment. They're also going to pay another $30 to register. No way. It'll never happen. Not in my market. Right.
Well, my territory is different.
Exactly. And of course, now everybody does it. And it's, it's almost expected at this point. It's kind of an industry standard. And so I think you're exactly right. We do get that from franchise owners that are afraid. And that's usually what you hear is, well, you don't understand my market, right? It's different. And I always just like to say the example of like, well, it must suck not to have Starbucks there because, in your town where everybody's so frugal and practically minded, where you can get coffee at McDonald's for $1, no one certainly is going to pay $3 for a coffee at Starbucks because you can get it across the street at McDonald's for $1, right? Well, no, I mean, we have Starbucks. And I'm like, okay. They're like, but that's a difference of $2. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's what we're talking about here. $2 a class, right? Right. $2 a cup of coffee, $2 a class. Actually, it's even different because you're talking about a 300% price increase, and I'm only talking about a 20% price increase, right? So anyway, we're on the same page about that.
Absolutely. Dave, are there any new trends that you're seeing in the industry now?
Good question. I would say probably the biggest one is that there's a lot of action here. It seems like every time I turn around, there's a new brand kind of jumping into the space, which I welcome. I'm not afraid of competition by any means, and I feel like the more we get out there and validate that what we're doing is useful and important to the community of our clients, like the parents, the easier it gets for everyone. I'm definitely like a high, rising tides raises all ships kind of guy. Totally. That's why I think Justin and I at Soccer Shot still get along because we understand like we can coexist and not really interfere with one another. So I would say that's a big part of it. I've definitely seen that trend. I would say the other thing is that most of our locations have moved for our enrichment programming to a monthly subscription model and away from a seasonal model. The traditional model in our industry has been, you've got a 10 or 12 week season and then parents sign up for that block of time and they pay for it. And it has a beginning and an end. A lot of times you get that child or that parent to sign up for one season and then maybe they don't come back, especially if you're a single sport program. Sure. Because then that, if you did it in the summer and then you sign up in the fall, it's kind of the same thing over again. That's where I think we do have a bit of an advantage being a multi-sport program with hundreds of different lesson plans. We can teach at a childcare center 52 weeks a year and never repeat a class. Wow. And so we offer our program mostly as a monthly subscription model. And you pay, we hit the credit card every month. Your child participates every Thursday at 9:30. And it's open enrollment. So you sign up when you want to join. If you want to cancel and drop out, you can do that at any time. And I would say we're starting to see more and more of our competitors going with that kind of model as opposed to the distinct starting and ending season. And then the other trend I would say is summer camps are huge. Like summer camps are becoming such a big business. And I think it has to do with the fact that, you've got this dynamic, 80% of school-age children have two working parents. Those parents aren't off during the summer, right? So they've got to go, those kids have got to go somewhere. So your early elementary kids that are in kindergarten, first and second grade, the parents have to find out what they're going to do with those children over the summertime. And summer camps is the answer. And so some of our biggest franchises, like the original franchise location in Dallas, Texas, does a very meaningful part of his revenue for the year in the 2.5 months of the summertime. And so that seems to be another growing trend. It's like summer camps are really big. I would say the last thing is when I was growing up, if you went to a public school like I did and you had two working parents after school, you were what we called a latchkey kid. I was kindergartner. I'd get off the bus and I'd go home to an empty house.
Yep.
And now I think if you do that as a parent, like they call child services on you, it's not, they don't do that anymore, right? So now there's this big industry of aftercare.
Sure.
And so that's another big opportunity where, we at Kidokinetics are now going in and into the public school environment and teaching programs that are during those aftercare hours, because those schools are struggling with what do we do with these kids 5 days a week for 3 hours a day,
Right.
And so we're kind of part of that answer. And so some of that is done through like working with PTA and PTO organizations, offering it as a enrichment that may double as a fundraiser for the PTA. And then also there's some government programs that will help offset some of those costs, like Title I and 21st century grant programs and things like that that'll pay for services for after school programs.
Sure. Yeah, times have changed for sure.
Yeah.
Dave, so what's the long-term vision for the company? How big is big? Where do you see this thing going?
I mean, I never like try to put these big finite lines in the sand. I think, everybody has their obvious benchmarks. I'm sure we'll celebrate when we get to 100 locations. I'm sure we'll celebrate when we get to, milestones of system-wide revenue, like, 25 million or 50 million or 100 million.
Sure.
Those kinds of things. So I try to look beyond like what is, my personal situation and think about what does this look like beyond me at some point, because, that'll happen eventually in one way or another. And so I really feel like, first of all, Kidokinetics can become a meaningfully impactful brand in the US or North America. One of our sort of out there goals is to get to the point where we're impacting 1 million kids a year. Mm-hmm. We're a long ways away from that, but we'd like to get to that at some point. I think that's valuable. What we do as a service is very exportable internationally. And so I would see us expanding the brand, probably first into Canada and then maybe the UK and other places over the next, decade or so. I think that is pretty easy for us to do. And I think that's an interesting way for us to go. And so, we have our usual milestones. Like I said, get to 100 locations, get to 200 locations, get to a 1 million kids a year in our program, those kinds of things. I think that's kind of what we think about. But I expect that the brand will continue to do well and continue to grow and hopefully have a meaningful impact on the families that we work with for many, many years to come.
And they will, and you may be surprised down the road when you find out the impact you made as those kids became adults. And then when they have their kids in a Kidokinetics program, that is just like, that's crazy. Yeah. That is just a wild feeling.
Terry experiences that now because she's been in that South Florida market for so long. She's got millennial parents that are like, I did Kidokinetics when I was in, whatever. And now my daughter is 5 is in it, or whatever. So
it is the most amazing feeling. That is awesome. Bigger picture on franchising, if we could, Dave. So you've been in franchising for a long time. What's been maybe the biggest surprise?
I think we all recognize that the vast majority of people who become a franchisee for the first time, for them, it's the first time they've ever owned and operated a business. Mm-hmm. And it's not a surprise to me any longer, but the percentage of people who come into this with the wrong expectations about how hard it's going to be is still like, they still all underestimate the amount of work. And I actually have a little graph that I show franchises when we do our discovery day, and I call it the franchisee happiness chart. And I say, if you decide to move forward and we decide you're a good fit and you become a Kidokinetics franchise, the day you sign the agreements is the happiest day you're ever going to have as a franchise.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not saying you won't ever be happy again, but you won't ever be that happy again, right? And then it starts a steep decline because you start to realize this is a lot of work and it's risk. And there'll be a point probably 3 or 4 months into this where you go, I bet the family farm on this business and I'm nervous as heck right now that this is actually going to go.
The honeymoon is over. Now we're in the grind.
Yeah, the honeymoon's over. And then it'll get better. You'll bottom out there somewhere. And then you'll start to climb that happiness curve again. And somewhere down the road when your business is profitable and it's doing well and it kind of doesn't require you to be in the middle of it all day, every day to operate.
Yeah.
Then maybe you can enjoy the experience that sold you on this in the first place, which was that brochure that had like a happy couple clinking champagne glasses on a yacht, looking out over a sunset because they're these happy, successful business owners.
Right.
I said, but there's a long ways between signing franchise agreements and clinking champagne glasses on a boat somewhere, right?
Yes,
and so
sir.
I say that because it's not a surprise to me anymore, but it's still a little bit of like, I will literally have that conversation with every franchise on our signing call,
Yes.
and they'll sign up anyway, and they'll still, be surprised in 4 months when it's hard. And they're like, boy, this is just harder than I thought. And I'm like, I told you, like I told
Right.
you over and over again how hard this was going to be. And, but they get over it, right? Like I've watched these franchise systems kind of settle down over time. And this one, Kidokinetics, is in that process of settling down. And people get used to it. They're like, okay, this is how it is. It's going to take work.
Right.
But I love what I do, and I love what we're doing, and I think it's important. And I can see how eventually this is going to be a good, profitable business that I'm really going to be proud of.
That's beautiful. Dave, you know why I love that it's a challenge? Is because it keeps competition out. Because if it was so easy, everybody would do it.
Absolutely.
That's the beauty of this whole thing, is that we actually minimize competition because it's a challenge. And if you don't have a resource such as yourself and your support team, or whether it's Soccer Shots or Soccer Stars or I9 or anybody for that matter, the fact that you have a support team as a franchise organization gets you through the grind. When you're doing this by yourself and you're running a mom and pop, you are not expecting this grind that we go through in any business. This is not a kid's a kid's franchise issue. This is any kind of business issue, a normal, normal life cycle of a business.
Yeah, for sure. The number of times that I've seen on a franchise application that comes through and it says, top 3 reasons, like, why do you want to start your own business? And the number 1 reason is I want to spend more time with my family. I'm like, I don't know who's been talking to you, but starting a new business does not equal spend more time with your family. Like, get that idea out of your head right now.
Right. Yep. No, that's true. That is definitely a misnomer. Why do you think, and you've done this now, you've accomplished it with your first company, you're well on your way with Kidokinetics. Why do you think 84% of all franchisors never get to 100 units?
That's a great question. I think it's a couple of factors. I think probably the main factor is that just because you have a good, successful local business does not automatically mean that you can scale a national franchise business, because those two things are completely different things. And it's just a very different skill set. I think that's a lot of why Terry and I work so well together. We very clearly understand our roles in the organization and our lane, so to speak. And Terry's the product. Like, she's the business model expert. She knows how to teach the classes and train the coaches and talk to the schools and build those relationships. Like, she's that subject matter expert. And I'm the scale guy. Like, I know how to go build and scale and put the pieces together and bring in the capital and the things that we need to do in order to get scale. And most of the time, people don't have both of those skill sets. Like, it's pretty rare to have both. And so I think that's probably the main reason. And I think another reason is that the industry that goes out and tries to help people franchise their business doesn't really touch on that enough. Like, I think they are happy to take your money and turn you into a franchise and give you an FDD and a website that says you're selling franchises now. And they do that. And I'm not faulting them. I mean, that's their business model is their business model. But I think there's not enough in that circumstance. Like, there's not enough in that process to really prepare that individual for what it's going to take to successfully build the franchise. And I would say capital is a big part of that equation. It's, it's different now than it was when you started and when I started one-on-one mobility.
Absolutely.
Especially if you want to go at any kind of meaningful pace, like, get ready to spend a couple $1,000,000. Like, it's not cheap. Most people who have a small local business and someone's talking to them about franchising it, they don't have that. They might have 150 or 200,000 that they say, well, I can go tap into equity in my home, or I can use cash flow from my native business to try to build my franchise. And it's not like, if you want to provide the right levels of support, that's not enough. It's not even close. The amount of money that we've spent just building our own systems, which will pay big dividends down the road, because I love owning my own code and having control over my own system and not paying licensing fees to a third party forever and ever and being like their captive audience for a really long time. But the front end cost of building that is not insignificant. Yeah. And so, if you want to do it right, build a team of support, a support team that can really provide solid, meaningful support to your franchises, and then just front-loaded the front-loaded effort to go find new franchisees. I don't care which route you go. If you want to go the broker route, get ready to spend a couple $100,000 just getting there, signing up for them, going to their events. And that's before you sell your first unit, right? Or if you're going to do it organically, get ready to spend a couple $100,000 on advertising and lead generation and building a website and all this. These things are all very expensive, and they've not gotten cheaper over the years. When you and I started the first time around, maybe if you had $500,000, you could get away with it. Today, it's a lot more than that.
Right.
And so I think that's a barrier. That's a big barrier. People just don't have the resources to do it right.
I totally agree with you. It is a different game, and I'm not sure if I would have done it the same way in the future that I did back in 2003.
Yeah. It's harder now. It's definitely harder.
Being a bootstrapping founder is not for the faint of heart. And as it was back then, it's different now.
It take years off your life.
Yeah, I could say that for sure. Dave, this has been awesome. I've enjoyed our time together. If someone was interested in learning more about Kidokinetics, where would they go?
Yeah, just go to kidokinetics.com. You can navigate to our franchise website to learn about the franchise side. There's a lot of great information about us there, and everything you need to know, you can access from right there.
Sweet. All right. And last thing, I always finish every podcast with the tip jar, because the franchise community, as you pointed out in the very beginning, is so generous with sharing information. So before I franchise my concept, is there maybe a piece of advice that you would give me? Besides the fact, make sure you're well capitalized, because you made that well clear, which I agree with it.
Yeah, I believe this firmly. All companies that become really great eventually start with a very strong and positive culture. And so if you're not focused on the culture of your organization, whether it's a native business that you're thinking of franchising or a new franchisor that you're trying to build, every organization has a culture. The question is it an intentional one or not? Is it the one that you want? And the one that you want will attract and retain high-performing individuals that will give you the discretionary effort to make your franchisees be more successful and be happier. And so you have to be able to focus on, that building of that culture. I'm writing a book about it right now. I very much believe that that's the core essence of building a great company over time. Get the culture right.
Awesome. Dave, thank you so much. I love that. Great tip there. I wish you all the continued success with Kidokinetics.
All right. Sounds good, Frank. Thanks so much. Have a great week.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.